We do all kinds of things here at Word in Your Ear.
We do podcasts.
We do video casts.
Quizzes.
Crowdcasts with famous authors.
And we can guarantee to make your next birthday one you will never forget.
There's only one way to make sure you get all of this, you get it in full, and you get it first.
And that's by becoming a supporter on Patreon.
Details here.
Word in Your Attic, a Zoom with a view.
He looks like the kind of people I used to avoid going into the roundhouse.
That's right. He looks like me, actually, then.
Yeah. That's enough of abusing our producer, Alex. So welcome to another Word in Your Attic. It's delightful to be joined by Gary Kemp. Good morning, Gary.
Great to see you.
Thank you for finally having me on. I've been watching you from afar and wondering why I wasn't being invited. My pout was getting more and more.
No, we didn't dare, Gary. We didn't dare. And now we dare. So yeah, where do we find you?
Yeah, I'm at home, central London. I've got a little box studio up here, and I just as I was. I'm trying to hopefully that my son doesn't wake up at any minute, sleeping in as he does because it's holiday time, and goes off and plays the Steinway and interrupts us with beautiful rhapsodic classical.
Yeah, this is the son. You posted a clip the other day of him playing the piano, and it starts off at quite conventional speed. And you think, well, he's pretty good. And then he goes into this absolutely unbelievable kind of ripple up the keyboards. And I thought it was phenomenal. Actually, how old is he? He's a teenager, isn't he?
He's 16. But he, we moved in here 20 years ago. I bought a nice piano to put in for me to write songs on. And, and then he fell in love with it straight away. And he's way advanced. He did his grade 8 years ago when he was
grade 8.
Grade 8.
Okay.
And he loves classical music. And but I think film is what he really loves. And it's extraordinary now because when we were kids, we just wanted to be in bands, right? That was the ambition of all young men, probably, unless you wanted to be a doctor or a lawyer. And kids now either want to do something in film or want to be a YouTuber or have a podcast as wonderful as yours.
Right.
Or indeed yours.
It's funny because there has been some discussion of this of late, hasn't there, about is the band dead? Because like you say, when you were a teenager, it was the obvious thing to do. If you wanted to play music, you went and found 4 other blokes and you formed a group. People don't do that so much nowadays, do they?
Well, I wonder if the gang is dead, because place is dead, because people sit alone at their keyboards and their computers. If you look at the great youth movements and musical moments change over the decades, they always involve themselves with place, whether it's a club. Let's grab one from the air. It would be the UFO Club, and was born Psychedelia or Middle Earth, or the Roxy or something, So people had a journey. They had to get somewhere. They had and to walk in alone is not necessarily a very comfortable thing to do. You walk in a gang.
Yeah.
And stepping on stage as a gang is also something that you wanted to do. And I wondered about this a long time ago because when we were happening in the 80s, America seemed to produce solo artists more than we did.
Absolutely.
And I think it was because our music tended to be rooted in the working classes, and maybe there was there wasn't that sort of musically homeschooled son who was brave enough to wander out on his own onto a stage and sing his poetry.
Yes.
And or whether it had something to do with our jazz background, I don't know, but it certainly was a very British thing to be in a gang and to find strength in that, and that doesn't exist now because kids are used to being rather solitary.
Well, the best possible lineup at the moment appears to be being you playing all the instruments. You're a kind of 20-year-old who's a brilliant keyboard player and a brilliant guitarist. You also play the bass and do percussion, and you can put the whole record together in a place very like the one you're sitting in now, and that just solves all the logistical problems of the current world,
You don't need a drummer, do you?
No.
That was always the thing, wasn't it? When we were forming a band,
it was the drummer.
Yeah.
Who is the guy who actually wants to be a drummer? I mean, when I grew up, I wanted to be at the front of the stage.
Yeah.
But also the drummer had to have a means of transporting the drums around, didn't he?
Well, a dad.
Yeah, well, so that was an asset for the whole group, wasn't it? Really, there was a vehicle at some stage.
Which is how Bill Wyman actually got into the Stones, wasn't it? Because he had a van that they could transport things in.
There was Ian Stewart, I think, had a van.
Oh, was Ian Stewart at the van?
Yeah.
All right, yeah.
But there was generally somebody with a van. Now, normally on these chats, we ask people what they've been doing during lockdown. But in your case, we know you've been making a record.
Yeah, I was meant to be on the road with Nick Mason and Saucerful. Obviously, that got cancelled, and I'd already started writing what I thought, could become an album, but I was dabbling really rather nervously in it. And I think there were two things that inspired me to do that. One was turning 60, and the other one was probably doing Saucerful of Secrets and feeling a different sense of confidence about being at the front singing and playing more guitar and being accepted into that Pink World fraternity. But then when that got all cancelled, we moved out to the country for a bit, and I quickly put together a mini studio and started working, and then found myself working remotely because I don't want the computer to be the final drummer on the record. I wanted I had Ash Sohn plays on the record, Roger Taylor plays on the record, and of course remotely is how you can do it. And if you think of the TV screen or the in your computer screen as a window in a studio between the control room and the studio, it actually isn't that much different. In fact, I've been in studios where they only have a computer and a little camera inside. So I managed to, work with various brilliant musicians over the internet. And then, of course, when lockdown lifted, I went into a studio and did some rather loud guitars and stuff for myself, and some singing, because I prefer the atmosphere of a real studio too.
Yeah.
So was it produced by you then? Was it mostly your judgment of what was going on to into the machines?
No, I hooked up with a guy called Toby Chapman, who played keyboards for Spandau Ballet for years, and has played keyboards with many people and produced his own records. But mostly he became my sort of confidence, really. I wanted to go and do some vocals, and that was the thing I was probably the most insecure about, and to do on my own. I don't like.
So you're not a frustrated lead vocalist then? It's something you're quite nervous about.
Well, I spent years writing for a bloke with a massive voice.
Yeah.
So that's always, when it comes down to, but then I have, I'm singing my lyrics, my words, and that's a very different set of communication skills. And I think people want something different from a guy who they don't necessarily want the big voice when you're singing your own.
No, that's true, actually. Yes, yeah.
And so, but I think singing with Saucerful of Secrets had changed that slightly. But I just don't like recording on my own vocals. You want feedback. How does that sound? The guy trying, why don't you try this? Something I wouldn't have thought about. And so I went in with Toby, and we sort of started work on my demos, and then and they eventually grew and turned into an album. And I think. It was an album that I realized I was forming when I realized there was a connection between the songs, and they weren't a bunch of disparate tunes, that there was a lyrical connection, and sometimes even then later musical motifs that I joined some songs with. So that there were subjects that were resonating with inside this group of songs.
Some songs.
I don't know whether you got sent it. I don't know whether you heard
it. Yeah. No, I listened to it yesterday. There's some lovely songs. There's one called In Solo and one called I Remember You, and they remind me of late 60s David Bowie. Those beautifully crafted pop songs with a slightly psychedelic ballad kind of edge to them, rather like those things written by Graham Gouldman. Was there a particular tone you were trying to strike?
I think it depends on what song it was. I think that, Scott Walker was definitely, and was definitely someone that I like. I think there was there's a slight theatrical element to the storytelling, maybe.
Yeah,
there's two songs you mentioned. In Solo is obviously, it's 6.5 minutes long. It it's a story about people struggling to live in a city, the paradox of being in a city, but actually being the sense of loneliness that strikes one within hundreds of thousands of people. And I started telling a story about this woman that then it switched to a guy, and I realized as I wrote the song that they were actually together, and by the time you get to the end of the song, you realize that. And I grew the song bigger and bigger, and I think part of it is working with Saucerful, that I'm not just having to write 4-minute pop songs, and I enjoy the elongated musical, and listening to my son playing classical music downstairs, and I wanted to visualize where I'm going. I see it very cinematically. If you take that song in particular, there's a moment when the guitar solo comes in, and then there's a big Greek chorus, and I see that as the coming out of the close-ups of the man and the woman and going up into the skyline, and then it goes into an electronica, and that, to me, the way I describe that to my producer and when I'm working, is that's the camera swooping down and going inside their heads for those few minutes before we come back to the resolution. And I think I've always, maybe it's because I'm an actor as well, but I do tend to more and more write as a visual exercise.
Yeah, right. It's funny you saying about having to have an audience when you do, or it's helping to have an audience when you do vocals or somebody in the room. We're looking, I don't know if you saw the clip that was doing the rounds a few weeks ago of Sinatra singing. It was a recording. It was a very good year in 1965, I think.
I did hear it, yeah.
Do you see the clip? Because it's in the studio at Capitol in Hollywood.
No, what did I hear? I heard sorry, no, I thought you were talking about
this is a clip, and
they've got him recording.
Secretaries, aren't they, Dave?
And he used to invite when he was recording in the Capitol Tower, they used to invite the secretaries. Just come down, you can sit there, just be quiet, but he prefers to have an audience. So it's really interesting to see him. Yeah. He preferred it to feel like a club.
Well, it's the actor in him as well.
Yes, I suppose so.
We always talk about, sorry.
No, just say it's just sort of the need for a reaction, isn't it? To feel that the vocal is having some effect and is moving.
I think because vocals are communication. You are. Someone said, "What do you want to do with your album? What do you want your album to do?" And I was very happy when Columbia wanted to sign it and Sony, and that was great. I don't think it's going to change the world, and it's certainly not going to make me a wealthier man. But you just want to communicate it. You want people to hear it, because that's what art does. It's telling stories to other people so they can get something out of that. And I think it's a very human instinct. We read books, we see paintings, we listen to music, because we're hoping we can find a piece of information in there that will help us not feel alone in the world. And I think Frank's sitting there singing to his secretaries, he's getting some feedback off their faces.
Yeah.
Do I backphrase this a bit more now? Actually, with Frank, it's probably a sexual thing as well. But
it probably is. No, he likes the idea of being surrounded by admiration. It probably helps, even if you're Frank Sinatra.
Yeah, but look at it this way. I've acted on stage in plays, and you'll do all the rehearsals and you do the dress rehearsal in front of just the director, and you're doing it one way. As soon as there's an audience in there, you're definitely feeling the tempo of the audience, and you're holding back here, you're delivering faster there, and hopefully you're doing a better job.
Now tell me, because you've done both, this is quite interesting. It fascinates me. This morning you were kind enough to send a message saying I might be 5 minutes late. I got an electrician in. Now, most musicians, 5 minutes late doesn't count at all. That's not lateness whatsoever. In the theatre, 5 minutes really matters. Yeah. Like hell. Do you have theatrical discipline or musical discipline? And how do those two things work?
I do. And I think it was because as a kid, I went to a drama club, this wonderful woman called Anna Scher, who had a little drama club that she held inside a community hall in a block of flats near where I lived in Islington. And I went there from about the age of 10. And I don't think my parents even knew I was going there. I had a paper round, and so I could afford to spend the money to go in to see her. And my parents didn't know I'd gone there until I got my first acting job. And it was all working class kids mostly. as it went on,
Phil Daniels was there, wasn't he? I think
Phil Daniels was there. In fact,
that's right. I remember.
I met Phil there. My first band was with Phil.
Yeah.
We used to go and do sort of. We used to go and play. I remember we played "Stay With Me" from the Faces. That was one of our first sort of covers, and then gradually more middle class kids came from Canterbury, and we were exposed to all different kinds of stuff. But the one thing she was very insistent on was it was the 3 Ps, and I've forgotten one of them, but I know one was professionalism and the other one was punctuality.
Yes, I'm sure.
And she wouldn't let anyone be late. And so I can only apologize for those 5 minutes, but
no, you don't have to apologize.
and I can't. I'm a stickler for it, and I was quite fascist in the band, back in the 80s. I mean, I would really be upset if anyone was late for anything, because it would make me nervous more than anything.
No, absolutely. I'm completely with you. But also the other thing, and I'd be interested in your views on this. I'm always fascinated by, I see bands, and sometimes they don't appear to know whether it's going well or not. Whereas actors always know. They can tell. Yeah. And they know if it's been a good show or a poor one or whatever. And they're quite forthright about it. Bands, particularly loud rock bands, often seem as if they don't know. They're just quite happy playing the tune.
Yeah.
Is that your experience?
I think you're right. I mean, the first thing usually, and this is including the bands I've been in, the very first thing you talk about when you come off stage is the audience. Yeah. Every time, whether it's acting or music. And in theatre, you have very different audiences. So you have if you can have an audience that picks up on the comedy or picks up on the darkness. And sometimes if they're not laughing at the gags, that's because they've gone with the darkness. And there's usually some dominating people within the audience that somehow controls everybody else. And I know that from experience. And you must have sat in an audience and think, oh, Christ, I'm the only one laughing here. I better... And so I'm going somewhere else with this. And it's usually down to the person you've gone with. You're seeing it or the person in front of you. And it spreads in the theatre. In a rock concert, you just want adulation because there's no fourth wall. It's meant to be the third wall. But I do think you're right. I think if you're going on stage and you're not accepting the audience, but you're rather nervous, and maybe you're a shoegazing band, or you're and it's like, oh Christ, I wished I was in the rehearsal room.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. That's the thing. They just sort of don't want you to be there.
The thing you worry about the most often when you go on stage is not the audience. It's a technical mistake. It's a fuck up with the amps or lights, or and I think that worries you the most. Obviously, come to the guitar solo, you might be worried a little bit there, fretting a little bit there. But I think it's important to get this fourth wall open, and you open it gradually. This is what I think the best rock musicians do, or any musician does, when they're doing a concert. You start off in the way the audience want you to be, which is much higher than them, on a higher realm. You are heroic. You are representing them in a planet that they could only dream of going to. And as the show goes on, you start to come down to their level, and they start to go up to yours. So, I mean, the classic way is, let's turn the house lights on, everybody.
Yeah.
but that sense of then communion between the audience and the band, if you've written a successful structure to your set list and your show, that should be on equal level by the end of the show.
Yeah.
That's so well done.
And then you go back to being higher, of course.
Yes.
Back to the room they can't get into at the whole wherever.
Although don't they say that the house lights and the lights that the worse the album, the more expensive the light show, in order to kind of dazzle and stun the audience into not realizing they're being shortchanged. I don't know. Is that a cliche?
I mean, listen. Some bands are incredible shoegazers, like Pink Floyd, for example.
Yeah.
I mean, they made an entire career by ignoring the audience.
Yeah.
and therefore having a massive screen at the back which did all that for them. And in a way, their appeal to certain boys was that.
Absolutely.
These are guys who don't look great in the school playground. You know, it's all in there.
Yeah, no, it's true.
But
so
also
when you're playing with Saucerful of Secrets, you got obviously very experienced musicians there. You got Nick Mason, you got your mate Guy Pratt, and so forth. Do you come to the fore in those discussions about how you might do things? Because you've obviously got views on those things.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I think it's a very equal band. I think Nick's main thing when we started was he didn't want a tribute act.
Yeah.
He didn't want us just to emulate the records, and he wanted us to. I'm used to. In Spandau Ballet, I was always used to being the one talking in the middle and arranging the songs. Guy and I have a relationship that goes back years and years to the 80s. We know each other very well. And so we have I think we gag a lot. I think that's why we ended up creating Rockonteurs, because we thought we were the funniest people in the room.
Right.
But it's very equal. We all jib in, as it were, and Nick's very open to pushing the tracks into ways that because I'm not a session player. So I wanted to put some of my own personality into what, I was doing, but I'm respectful of Sid. I'm respectful of David. And at the same time, we could add solos in places that solos didn't exist. I have a guitar solo part in Saucerful of Secrets, a song that doesn't have one. It was just, I fancy one. And that's what we're trying to achieve with Saucerful. And it's worked. And the other thing is, it's probably, unlike most other Pink Floyd bands, we smile.
Yeah.
Very unlike the Pink Floyd themselves. Yeah.
So
it's funny. I always had this image of you, as a kid listening to kind of Bowie and T-Rex and Motown and soul and stuff. And I guess you would have been about what? How old would you have been when Metal came out? I don't know, 12 or something. Did you listen to Pink Floyd back then? It was.
I'm totally eclectic kid. And I think a lot of my eclecticism was to do with going to a grammar school.
Yeah,
I'll explain that, because I do think of pop music through the lens of class quite a lot.
Yeah.
And in my school, there was definitely a mixture of the working class kid and the Flash, who was into Rod Stewart and Bowie and feathered haircuts, toppers shoes. Before then it would have been brogues or loafers, and then there was the middle class kids who lived in Islington, who were had longer hair, wore trench coats, and carried their albums under. We all carried our albums.
We did,
like a flag.
Yeah.
So we really should have had them on a flagpole, and we could have walked around the.
They're about the same size as a flag, which is not coincidental.
Yeah. And so, I'd be having my, whatever it might be at the time, Ziggy Stardust, maybe, if you like, T-Rex. And then I'd see from afar kids with Close to the Edge, or Groundhogs. And I sort of slightly wanted to be in that camp. I was quite aspirational.
Right.
Class-wise, if you like. I remember going to a kid's house and seeing they had books on their shelves. We never had books in our house. We went to the library and then we took them back. And my mum called magazines books.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
And I went and they had books. And in fact, I went to the one person who really impressed me was I went to Jay Landersman's house. Does that?
Oh, right. Fran Landersman and
He's the father of Julie Burchill's husband.
Yeah, he
Cosmo
died
Landersman.
only recently, didn't he?
Yeah, Cosmo Landersman is the writer who's the son.
Yeah,
Is the son. Yeah, he's a publisher, wasn't he, Jay Landersman, I think.
Yeah, he was a
literary figure,
Yeah.
counterculturalist. So they just went out to be awkward to the council, that meant. But no, I mean, they did held poetry readings and did all that.
Yeah.
And I went to their house because I knew Miles, who was one of their sons, and I'd got this little band with Phil Daniels. In fact, the very first thing we did, we went downstairs into the basement where Miles's to a playroom was, and there was a keyboard. A guy called Peter Hugo Daly, who's an actor now, was playing the keys, and Phil and me, and we went and we played Set the Controls for the Heart of the Sun over and I mean, we played it, you know, as well as we could. And but in that house, you know,
easy to play though, actually. You think about it, isn't it?
One chord.
One chord, about 3 notes.
In that house, you know, we'd have, you know, there's the poster of Che Guevara.
Yeah.
I was the thing that shocked me the most was their sofas and chairs didn't match.
Yes, that's a classic.
Yeah,
because we
Bohemians,
and I saw my first wok. I mean, this is like losing your middle class virginity.
This is so funny, Gary. I've got to interrupt you. We were talking to Craig Brown only the other day about his Beatles book. And he was talking about, you know, Paul McCartney landing in the Asher's house in Wigmore Street or wherever it was, Wimpole Street, in 1964. A classic tale of aspirational working class kid finds a middle class, and in their case, upper middle class family to sort of adopt him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And suddenly finds himself rubbing shoulders with a completely different sort of person. It's such a recurrent motif in English life, I think.
But it's an important part of the Beatles story, and
huge part.
I love the fact that they used to sort of escape along the outside of ledge.
Yeah, that's right.
But you know, John was not the arty one.
No.
You know, John was rooted in working class culture, and he didn't want to go that way. That was Paul.
Yeah.
But I think the whole Yoko thing later was John, you know,
trying to make up for it.
Definitely. I couldn't agree more. So John was writing songs, you know, inspired by what he heard on the radio and what he read in the Daily Mail or whatever. And Paul McCartney was the one out at the Indica Gallery, wasn't he? Listening to Shostakovich. And I know.
Exactly. And if you listen to their music, structurally, the writing, you know, Paul was in a very different place when he was right. Sorry, I digress here, but Paul was in a very different place in his writing. You know, he had vaudeville chords going on in there. You know, influenced by his dad. You know, John was much more, you know, straight up R&B, if you like. You know, blues and you hear John adding some of Paul's chords as they go along, and gradually him, you know, being taught, if you like. You know, John obviously had other things that Paul didn't, and that's why they were so great together in the same band. But I think the moment they met in equality, if you like, was Strawberry Fields and Penny Lane.
Yeah.
Anyway. So where I was I'm at Jay Landesman's house, and you know, I see wine, I smell garlic. Oh my God!
The walk.
This is fantastic. I saw my first walk. It's just brilliant.
I remember I had garlic pate, and I went home, and the next morning I woke up. My dad came into my bedroom.
What's the smell?
Yes, and he was like, "Not that." He never smelled anything like it in his life.
You've been hanging out with toffs. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And I think that sort of aspiration to go back after whatever 15 minutes, Mark, to finally answer your question.
Yeah.
Made me want to, listen to Floyd, listen to Genesis, listen to Yes. And that kind of prog rock music, if you like, more so obviously with Genesis and Yes, was, you know, rock music was such a working class folk music. That's what it was. You know, it came out of the struggle. And the middle class kids thought, well, how can I get in on this somehow? I can't sing about the struggle. And these are kids brought up on Bach, you know, brought up on Beethoven. And so if I'm going to do anything to do with electric music, I want it to have elements of sophistication that I grew up with in my parents' house and their classical records. And I think that's how I feel prog came upon us.
Yeah.
And I'm glad it did, because I think as a kid, my journey went really rapidly from Electric Warrior to Foxtrot.
Yeah.
But I definitely got more out of Foxtrot than I did out of Electric Warrior.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I think, I was into the depths and the layers and it would take me places. It was, I didn't go to church. I was thinking of picking it later, but I'm not sure now. But, I think Supper's Ready.
Oh, right. Okay.
I mean, that was my hymn.
Yeah.
That was my Jerusalem. In fact, he says right at the end, the New Jerusalem. He starts off that song, which is really super long. So I could lie on the floor when my mum and dad weren't there and put that record on and really get into every layer of that, as it developed and moved around and sophistication of it. And it starts off with someone getting up and turning the television off. So it's really mundane. It's right in your house. It's there. It's something and it ends up euphorically with the New Jerusalem. And I would go somewhere in my head. I wasn't quite sure where, but it was different to Bowie. Although I'd still love the theatre of both. So, and I think, and obviously Peter came on and wore that red dress and the mask and freaked everyone else out in the band at one point. It
is the theatre in a lot of that music, though. I was thinking about it. You listen to Dark Side of the Moon, and it's theatrical more than anything else. Starts with the heartbeat, ends with the voices. It's like lights gone down. It's an audio film, isn't it? Really?
Yeah.
That's how those records were made.
And they're about something, and it was about madness, obviously, and it felt like it was about madness. I went to see the show with my brother in 74 or 74, where they did it, and then they came on afterwards and they did Wish You Were Here, but they hadn't recorded Wish You Were Here.
Right.
So it had tracks in there that actually didn't make Wish You Were Here, made Animals, which shows you what Animals is like, really.
Yeah.
But, and Shine On You Crazy Diamond, I never forget watching that. I never heard it before. But that's another extraordinary thing in itself, isn't it? Bands playing albums before they're released.
Yeah.
This is it. They did. They played Dark Side of the Moon on the road. They developed on the road, didn't they? Before they started recording it.
Yeah, you recorded it when you tried it out.
Well, you tried it,
and you'd seen their reaction. You'd modified the record accordingly. It's really interesting.
It's like 50 years ago this year. Led Zeppelin on tour, kind of now doing Stairways to Heaven, which they didn't record until later in the year. Totally different way of going.
And so the rumor about this song started to spread too. So incredible publicity value. People say they're playing this absolutely amazing song. And it's really long, and it's in 4 different movements.
That's right. And Dark Side of the Moon was called Eclipse. That's what it was called, Dark Side of the Moon. And I guess you're right. You were at the unveiling of something.
Yeah.
You weren't just a ticket buyer going along to listen to stuff.
No.
Nowadays, where half of it is on hard drive anyway. The amount of times you see bands and you know that the backing vocals are on hard drive. In fact, most of the keyboards are. You were witnessing, you were in the rehearsal room with them.
Yes.
Listen, I don't know whether I would dare do such a thing as to play new material, because normally new material means bars open, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It does. But also now people would it would leak out, wouldn't it? I mean, it would be all over the place, and it would lose its.
That's right. I mean, its mystique doesn't exist. I mean, when we played the Blitz back, in those 2 shows in that club that where we didn't let record company people in. And the buzz went out. If we'd done that now, someone would have filmed it, put it on YouTube, and written bollocks underneath. And that would be it.
Yeah. It also relates to this whole business of you were talking about earlier, a place, and there's so many of those musical movements were based in a place, and you can't imagine a place nowadays.
No,
in the same way, can you?
No, because you had to meet somewhere, didn't you? So and you didn't have a mobile, so that meeting had to be really arranged quite
set up a week earlier.
Yeah,
and
a series of postcards.
So the idea of having this one night a week where you knew you would have like-minded people go, and I suppose with the Blitz, and everyone knows about the Blitz now, but there was this. It did draw a lot of people in who were very keen to be creatively famous, if you like, and creatively dominant, but they weren't all musicians. I think that was actually, you know, I mean, it probably was very like the 60s in a way, you know, when there were artists and filmmakers and poets, and, you know, we had all of that down at the Blitz. And fortunately, there wasn't another bunch of kids in the room going, no, we want to be the house band.
Yeah.
But you know, I suppose it's whether it's, you know, Il Pie, or whether it's you know, going back to those days, or, you know, there has been great change coming out of one mythological venue. The Joe Boyd book, White Bicycles, which talks about the UFO Club. I mean, that, to me, I was back there, you know, and I remember going down Tottenham Court Road looking for this place after reading.
Oh, did you? Oh, right. After it had gone, yeah.
No, it doesn't exist. Doesn't exist anymore.
No, I realise. Yeah.
But I'm looking for the ghosts. Do you know? I live in the centre of London, and, you know, I'm quite. I really like the Pre-Raphaelite movement. I think they would have formed a band if they were around 50 years later. But at that time it was paint, so they did that, and they lived nearby, you know, and they were very similar in a way, you know, a gang of mavericks who wanted to do something different and upset the people who came before them. When we started, we wanted to upset everyone who wrote for the NME, you know, because we felt that was over. It's going to be.
Well, you did that, Gary. You did that.
You succeeded. I was saying to Dave earlier, I can so remember in 1983 when he and I were at Smash Hits, who loved Spandau Ballet, or Never Off the Cover. I can remember bumping into you in Soho, and it was you and Tony Hadley, and you were wearing these fabulously expensive suits with gold watch chains, and you had orange silk scarves and pixie boots, but neither of you were wearing a shirt. I thought that was so great. It was just something. I thought this completely is how 1983 ought to look. You know, we were blistering heat. These people in really expensive clothes, but with no shirt. You know,
there's a song on my. If I can get this back to the thing, I'm joking. I don't need to.
Yeah.
There's a song called "Waiting for the Band" that's on the album.
Oh yes, about running up the street and going to the stage door, isn't it? That's right.
It's about being a fan. It's a hymn to being a fan, and it's about. So it starts off remembering really being a Bowie fan for me, although I'm not specific about it. And it's quite melancholy, because and it ends up finally with saying, after a diversion where I go inside the Hammersmith Odeon and the band come on stage, bam.
So is it based around Bowie then? I guess is that one particular.
It is, because when I used Theo Travis to play sax on that, and when the sax plays, underneath are voices from an interview that I stole from Bowie fans outside Earl's Court in 1978. Janet Street Porter was interviewing them, and I just took some of it. I got the rights, but took some of the answers and they don't mention Bowie in it. They talk about wanting to be different and how they cut their hair and it bubbles up around this music, and I got such goosebumps when I first laid it in, because it gave them the credit, if you like. The end of the song is really saying how that feeling never leaves. I'm still waiting for the band. I'm still waiting for these kids to walk around the corner with great suits on and no shirts. And I'm still waiting for people to come, for the next big thing to happen. Of course, it won't happen to me. It won't. I'm probably past that now. But that urge, that anticipation, that desire to be a fan is still really present in me, and I don't think that goes. And so I wanted that song to be about that feeling.
Tell me, have you kept any of the old Spandau Ballet gear? Have you kept any of your outlandish outfits?
Well, I know you would have loved me to have revealed things here.
Well, I can now see them in a glass case at the V&A. Actually, why not?
Bowie's so funny. Bowie kept everything, didn't he? Because he had such a sense of his own celebrity, even at a young age, and his own importance. I mean, it's probably something that we should be disappointed in him for. But I just put everything in a bin liner and took it to Oxfam.
Oh, really?
Oh.
Not into that anymore. So somewhere out there, maybe even in Africa,
Yes,
is a
somebody
guy,
wearing some pixie boots.
and a tartan suede with a
tartan scarf. Yeah.
Was there ever
And a
anything you wore?
blouse.
Was there anything you wore in those days? Paul Denoyer, you probably know, is an old colleague of ours.
Yeah.
Once invented a feature in the magazine, and the idea was that if you looked at all the old pictures of old bands, particularly bands who were known for dressing in interesting, striking ways, there was always one member of the group who looked as if they were never quite going along with the idea.
Yeah.
And the headline of this feature was, "Do I have to wear this, boss?"
Yeah.
The arrow was usually on Trevor Boulder. Or
I was just
somebody.
I was just about to say poor Trevor, but in truth, it was probably also Mick as well, who none of them really loved it. And then Woody, I mean, really, Woody.
Was there anybody in Spandau Ballet who was similarly? I would have hazarded a guess that John Keeble was like, I'm not quite convinced that I have to wear this. Tea towel.
I think at the beginning it was Tony.
Oh, right.
Most of all, Tony found when we suddenly went. I think Steve Dagger and I went down to Blitz. It wasn't Blitz then; it was Billy's.
Right. And
we'd already had the band at school. We were kind of like a power pop band, and then we dressed as soul boys, and we thought that would really annoy the enemy. We'd be dressed as soul boys because they hate soul music because it's all aspirational. But we were still stuck playing power pop. I'm not quite sure, and I think we lost every audience then. We sort of partly gave up, and then we went to the Billy's one night, which was the predecessor to Blitz, Steve Strange's club, still on a Tuesday in Soho, and Steve Dagger and I went, this is it. I'm going to buy a synthesizer, and let's get Tony down next week. And I remember taking Tony down, and then him having a conversation with Steve Strange, who had his hair conically sort of waved. You'll get terrible split ends like that, But even I think it was quite a bit of a shock at that time, and it was probably him. But we annoyingly already got. No, not annoyingly. I feel embarrassed about this. There was a kid who played bass for us in our original incarnation when we were Power Pop and the Makers. We were called the Makers, and we got it off of a furniture shop in.
They all sound tragic. All names that didn't go anywhere. They all sound funny. They all sound tragic.
And even terrible names that were successful sound great because they're transformed by success, aren't they?
Steve Norman and I were on a 38 bus going down Essex Road, and as we approached the Angel, we went past a furniture shop called the Makers or something.
That'll do. Yeah.
And anyway, there's a guy called Richard who played bass for us, and he was the one maybe not quite fitting in visually, like you say, feeling a little uncomfortable. And Steve Dagger said, who was a mate of ours, who became our manager, who was kind of managing us then. He was a couple of years older than us, still at the same school,
and still is involved with you today.
He still looks after
He's your manager, isn't he? Yeah,
he looks after the brand Spandau Ballet, if you like, because we're not actually a band at the moment, and he's looking after me. He manages me, So, and he said, "We've got to get rid of Richard." Why? He doesn't really fit in. I said, "Well, why would we get rid of him? We don't know any. Who would we know? Who would go in and play bass?" He said, "Well, your brother." I said, "My brother can't play anything." He said, "But he's the best looking bloke."
There you go.
That's
I'm so interested in this because
I love it.
It's like, Brian Epstein. It was Brian Epstein was the person who got rid of Pete Best. Andrew Oldham was the person who got rid of Ian Stewart.
Face didn't fit.
It has to be a person outside the band, doesn't it?
Pete Best argues to this day they got rid of him because he was the best looking.
Yeah.
Yes, he does.
It's unbelievable.
Well, it may be true, but
it's such a good logic because the point is he's really good looking, but he can't play the bass. But he can learn to play the bass. But if he's a brilliant bass player and he isn't good looking, there's not much you can do about that.
And of course, my brother became the star. He was the one who had his picture on the front cover of the Face when issue 3. He was the first Spandau artist to have his picture on the front cover of Smash Hits.
He was.
And so
was he really? Wow.
Yeah. So, it was worth getting him in. The other thing was, before then, he roaded for us, and we knew there was something wrong, because we'd all go to the bar after the show, and all the girls would gather around our roadie. So I mean,
yeah, get him in. Tell me about this. You say Steve kind of, I don't know how tongue-in-cheek you were about this. He manages the brand, even though the band is not kind of functioning or not playing any gigs. Does that mean anything? I suppose it does, doesn't it?
But does brand mean anything? I mean,
I don't know. You know, the brands go on. All these things, they live forever, don't they? Nowadays,
I mean, what Steve looks after is, obviously record companies come to you and say, "Can we do a box set? Can we do a greatest hits?
Yeah.
Have you got any material?" And so there's always that going on. There's also, people asking to use the songs, and he, I never sold my publishing. He still looks after that. So we keep it all in house, and make sure that it doesn't get, bands split up, but we want to make sure that the name doesn't get trashed in a way that we don't like. And I think it's important. And people come along and say, "Can we do a book?" There's got to be there's a place to go. We own the name.
Yeah. So you never sold your publishing. You must have read today that Paul Simon is the latest one to have sold his catalogue. God knows what Paul Simon's catalogue is worth. You're not tempted. Have you had offers recently?
Yeah, no, people really want this thing, don't they? I think there's, I don't know, people don't really like artists talking about money, but, the way I run it at the moment is my money comes in, and it it's not. But it keeps coming in, and if I sell it, it's going to come in a big chunk, and then I could fuck it up. I could just blow it all, and then where am I going to be? And I have no control then as well. And I think there's something quite nice about that ownership. Do you know what it goes back to? But I'm saying all this, but you might read next week that I've sold it. All right.
But isn't it to do with everybody's worry about, I don't know, just current circumstances we're in, and just the shape of the music industry is that they just simply cannot predict what this might be worth in 20 years' time. So you might as well just quit and run.
When you first start writing a song, I became very aware of this when I was 11 and wrote my first song. So my mum had stupidly bought me a guitar for Christmas. I had no idea why. I wanted something else, and they'd seen this in a shop window, and they'd had some idea. Maybe they bought it. It was in the shop window in Holloway Road in a shop.
You didn't want it.
That's so unusual.
I was confused by it. It was like, is this that was obviously last Christmas was the last toy that I ever got. I've somehow gone past toys. But it was beautiful. It was an F-hole steel string acoustic guitar, and it came with a Burt Whedon Play in a Day book, and of course. And I learnt 4 chords that were the 4 chords for, I think it's If I Had a Hammer. I say I think because I recently had a look at Burt Whedon's Play in a Day book, and If I Had a Hammer wasn't in there, but I won't let the truth get in the way of my story. And if I had a hammer, I'd sing in the morning. I really love the chords, but I just don't like that tune. And then I started to write my own tune over the top, and then my own lyrics. And then I had this sense that I owned this thing. I'd created it. In fact, those chords are the same 4 chords you'll find in True. They're the same 4 chords you'll find in Every Breath You Take. This is the straight up, C, A minor, F, G,
Yeah.
And so I think writing songs was about I'd be in the bedroom on my own, and I'd go in alone, and I'd come out with a song. So not alone, and owning something. It was a sense of that. So you could take someone else's, when I wrote True, part of my inspiration came from the Let It Be film. I was watching Let It Be. It must have been on TV then, because I didn't have a VHS, and this must have been for Paul Bandit, and I remember Dig a Pony, dig a pony, and I love that. Oh my God, John, I love the way you go that I word and you snake it up. That's so beautiful. So I sat at my guitar and I'm going and so a bit of it was Al Green.
Yeah.
you know, I'm so in love with you. I kind of wanted to write that song, but some of it was John. So you take these two things that you love as a fan and you put them together and you own something.
Yeah. So it's not easy to let go of that.
I had dinner with Paul Simon once.
Oh, go on.
And he told me the story of how he got the one of the titles. You probably know this story.
No, I don't. Go on.
How he got one of the titles for his songs. And he was in England and he was in a Chinese restaurant. And he was looking down the list of things to.
Is it Mother and Child Reunion?
Was that in England? I never knew it was England.
Go on.
And he saw there was a meal in there which was a chicken
omelette,
and it was chicken with egg, and it was called Mother and Child Reunion. And he thought, that's the song I should write.
Yeah. Well, he's done quite well out of it.
He has.
My God.
I know. Unfortunately, the bloke before him wrote the song called Chicken and Egg, and it got nowhere.
Oh dear. So your Saucerful of Secrets tour is back on for next year.
You've just announced dates for 2022, haven't you? I think.
Yeah, we've been trying to move everything around, obviously. So the UK tour is now in April 2022, and we've just announced part of the European tour. I think we're going to add to that. You know, my album comes out in June. I would love to. There's two things. I would love to go and play some live. You know, put a band together and play it live. But no one knows what the situation is. It's very hard to plan. My alternative is to put some more music down in my studio and think about another album. But you know, an album doesn't really feel fulfilled unless you got out and played it. It's in a room.
I tell you, it's almost on a lower level. If you have a book published and you don't get to go and talk in a bookshop, it's like you haven't had a book published.
Yeah,
it's a really odd thing.
But also, there must be
things.
There's part of it for the authors and for the musicians saying, "Well, what's the point?" Because the point is that interaction with the public.
It is.
And it's exactly the same predicament for writers as it is for musicians. That the first half of the process is you mostly in kind of solitary confinement, sitting there at a keyboard or at a guitar or whatever, composing something. And the second half is just that kind of fantastic interchange with the people who buy your music or read your books. And to take that away is just, you just think, well, this part of the equation's gone. The circuit is not complete.
That's right. And there's a sort of perfect storm as well at the moment, because along with the fact that you can't, when your album comes out, you can't go and perform it and therefore elongate the whole process of the album.
Yeah.
What people do now is release every single before the album comes out. So they might, things where they call them instant grats, instant gratifications, and they suddenly just appear out of the gray into a black and you can hear it. And when the album comes out, that's it.
That's it.
So where when we used to be, we'd release, another couple of singles after the album's already come out. But of course, once the album's out, people have got all the music, and they don't have it in any other form. They don't have the 7-inch. So there's that combined with the fact you can't go and play live. And I think a few rather, big artists that I know who've had albums out recently said it's really depressing. You just, when you've got a week after the album comes out, and then no one's talking about it.
It's depressing. That's a really good way of putting it.
Absolutely right.
It's kind of post-coital depression.
I was watching a very extreme example of this yesterday. The other day, there was a documentary about Paloma Faith. And she was talking about the idea that when she's on stage, admittedly, she's a pretty exaggerated version of your average performer, but when she's on stage, she feels kind of validated. It's then, with all that attention, all those people listening to her singing, it's then that she comes alive, and that's then that she feels she has a purpose. And without that, she obviously seems to be completely decimated. And I felt a lot of sympathy.
But I miss the rehearsal room, the process of making loud music together. If you turn all the pedals off that I've got and you've just got me playing these strings on a guitar, it's nothing.
Yeah.
Combine it with all these effects and with all the musicians in the room all syncopating together.
Yeah.
It's one of the most glorious feelings I've ever had.
Yeah.
And so I miss that. I miss making a loud sound with a group of people.
So, but to make up for the fact and to take advantage of the fact that all the musicians are all sitting at home like you with nothing else to do, being able to launch the Rockonteurs podcast with Guy Pratt.
Yes, of course. Sorry, we came along and tried to compete with you.
No. It's funny. You've had quite a lot of similar people. You had Midge here the other day. You've had Nile Rodgers. So we do overlap a lot, actually.
We do.
Some great people.
We do. You know, obviously, our sort of USP is the fact that it's all musicians in the same room talking, and I think
or not in the same room,
or not in the same room, in the same virtual room talking. And I think that might help. I mean, obviously, Guy and I, our anecdotes are starting to recircle. And
oh, you'll find that. God, that's never happened to Dave and I. We're getting so old now. We genuinely forget we've told these stories before. We love. What is it? You know, a lot of people have complained that we've had it's got too male heavy, but I can honestly assure people we have asked lots. I bet you have. I bet you have.
And we've had people saying, well, not right now.
Yes.
So we do tend, but let's face it, that period that we sort of come from was more, I mean, listen, most of my female the new artists I like now, you know, there's King Princess, or there's some Vincent, or, you know, there's Lana Del Rey. There's a lot of great female artists.
It's overwhelmingly female nowadays. If it's biased one way, whereas it used to be completely the other way.
But I'd lay money. The records behind you right now, David, are mostly blokes singing.
Quite a lot.
There's
a fair few female.
So not only are we concentrating on an era, we're also we've also unfortunately had a lot of people saying not yet, and we are trying, and we do have. 2 in the can from wonderful female artists.
Well, good.
But we have different conversations. Maybe this is the problem. You know, my wife says that why men have struggled so much in the lockdown, because, you know, they never really get to talk about honest things about their feelings anyway. And all of us have felt completely, you know, terrified of what's been going on. And, you know, I felt very depressed at times, even though I'm beavering away trying to create. You still feel, you know, the world's been turned upside down. And last summer, I remember, you know, when we were allowed to escape for a bit, I went and had a drink with a mate of mine, and we were out for 3 hours, and I came back, and he said, how's his wife? You know, how's his family? You know, how's his work? What's he doing?
No idea.
She said, what did you talk about for 3 hours? I said,
but Tyrannosaurus Rex.
That's right. I said, the Beatles.
Yeah, this is it. Mark and I have known each other for pretty much nearly as long as you've known your brother, and you and your brother will know each other's birthdays. Mark and I do not know each other's birthdays.
No,
we talk for like.
I can get out what month it is, and it's ridiculous. Well, I've got to think with several of my mates whereby we have a policy of trying to see how long we can talk before we mention the Beatles. And then sometimes you just forget, and someone goes, dong, 7 minutes, you know, and it's so true. That's what you want to talk about. It's absurd, isn't it?
About the Beatles. And I think, you know, it's the greatest story ever told, isn't it?
I mean, it's our happy place. It's our happy place.
You know,
it is.
It never elongated it. There's a really particular short moment of time when this happened. It was extraordinary what happened. You know, I was reading Mark Lewisohn's book, a couple of years ago, and I'm lying in bed, and my wife and I reading in bed, and I'm reading the Beatles, and I start to well up, and she notices. I just said, what are you crying about? You know, what's in the book? I said, Paul's just met John, but you know he just met John. No. If he hadn't have met,
I know,
absolutely,
I wouldn't be sitting here, lying here in this bed with you in this house, because I probably wouldn't be in a band.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. There's a bit in that book where Ringo and Paul go to the same fair. It's a fairground, and they're on the Dodgems, and they've not met. And you want to reach into the book and tap them on the shoulder and introduce them to each other in case they never meet.
You know, the bit I like is when Mark interviewed Paul's first girlfriend, and when Paul first came to London with her.
Come to the establishment.
I saw her
club.
standing there.
And I live in Fitzrovia.
Yeah.
And she said that they ended up sitting on a bench in Fitzroy Square with him writing the lyrics for I Saw Her Standing.
After having gone to the establishment
dancing the night
after
before.
dancing through the night and holding each other tight.
And sleeping in their mate's room.
And
That's
what's
amazing.
more, hitchhiking from Liverpool to London.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
And of course, what's clear in Mark's book is that it could only have happened in Liverpool because it was a direct link on the boat.
On the boats to the records.
They were the first people to get hold of the records.
In England. Absolutely.
In England, yeah. Hit them and Tommy Steele, of course.
That'd be the first time you'd hear a cover version.
Tommy Steele.
I know. Have you read Craig Brown's book? The 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, I loved it. I thought
fantastic. We had him on our show the other day. It struck me as it was the first time, because most people who write about the Beatles don't necessarily write about them with a huge sense of humour. And one of the key things about the Beatles is that the four of them were so funny and so creative and so inventive.
Absolutely.
And he celebrates that all the way through, their quick-wittedness and their spark, you know.
People talk about Little Richard, the Everly Brothers, but actually the Goons were as big as an influence on the Beatles.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that British humour that goes with being in a band, I think, you can talk about bands like, Faces, who really celebrated that. Genesis, they weren't the best looking blokes when they were just three of them who were getting out there doing MTV. So they just said, right, well, let's be humorous. Let's be funny. The Police, even, they were all gagging, that all comes out of the Goons and that British and Monty Pythons and the
Yeah. Well, look, Gary, it's traditional on these chats that we finish by asking people to tell us, because we don't know, what is the greatest record ever made?
Oh, mate, I mean, that is so hard. I did bring along a couple of other things before.
Show us.
Show us them. Go on,
let's see.
What have you got?
I have something that is a bit like a piece of the cross. Right?
Oh, go, it'll look good.
But I don't know whether you could see this.
You're going to have to explain what that is. Go on.
Screw on the end there, and that goes in there.
Right.
Little hole there.
Yeah.
You can barely see.
Yeah.
That was, I keep it in here, and that was given to me by Hutch Hutchinson, who played guitar with Bowie on the Ziggy Stardust tour, and he played at Hammersmith Odeon, a show I was at when obviously he retired. And when he was walking off stage, Hutch, Mick Ronson gave him that, and that's Mick's guitar tuner.
Oh, right.
Amazing.
And I mean, they don't look like that now, so it must have gone back in Mick's life quite a way. But you see what I mean? Piece of the cross.
That is a piece of the cross. Yeah. That's wonderful.
And then I was looking downstairs at some odds and sods that I had. No, was this the predecessor of Smash Hits?
Well, it was still going. It was a totally separate thing. Chart Songwords and Disco 45 was
what Smash Hits were based on.
The early idea of doing songwords of hits.
And this is something I had at the time. Early
Sniffin
Glue.
Wow.
When I was
Annie Baker. Yeah.
God.
And what was his name?
Mark Perry.
Mark
Perry.
Yeah.
From
Alternative ATV, wasn't it? That's right.
I mean, this changed a lot of the way we think about magazines, didn't it? Really.
It's really good. Danny Baker's stuff in that is still so funny. His singles reviews are absolutely peerless.
This is nice. What a picture that is. Look.
Oh yeah.
Oh God.
Bowie from the Sunday Times magazine in about 75, July 75.
Lovely.
Oh gosh, that's a lovely thing.
Yeah, it is. It's gorgeous.
There's nothing like leafing through old magazines.
I didn't buy programs when I went to concerts in those days, but I did get this one for some reason, which is the Who at Charlton.
Oh wow, with Little Feet.
Little
Feet on that show.
Little Feet, Alex Harvey.
Yeah.
Streetwalkers, which was Roger Chapman's.
Yeah, and Molly Whitney. Yeah.
And a band here, it says, called The Outlaws, and I can't remember who The Outlaws
were. The Outlaws were quite a big, they were a sort of country rock band who were on Arista, who nobody talks about anymore, but at the time sold a few records.
Was it sort of like British pub rock?
No, they were American. They were, they were sort of Eagles type group, I suppose.
This is funny. Look, The Warlock of Love.
Oh God, what is that?
Marc Bolan?
That is by Marc Bolan. Is that his poems or what?
Marc Bolan's poems. So this came out before he ever, before he was kind of like a teen idol, and this is more Tyrannosaurus Rex period.
Yeah.
Let me see what the date is on here.
Oh God.
It was 1969.
Oh, wow.
There's a poem here. The vanquished sun is like the withered yolk of a weathered egg. That's it.
I can smell the joss sticks from here. I can smell the incense.
I can smell Jay Landersman's house.
Yeah. With loads of garlic.
There was definitely a withered egg still left in there.
Oh, God, that's brilliant. That's
Fantastic
that you got that stuff.
Okay, wait. I've got. Oh, Chris, you know what? When you told me to do this and get an album, you know, I literally.
He couldn't do it. He's got 10.
Yeah, I was leafing through, grabbing, and the
Do a
electricity.
countdown from 10 to 1. Go on.
Okay.
All right, go on.
Foxtrot.
These are no order, and we had a story about that. And
Yeah, sure. Oh, I know what you. Oh God, I caught a glimpse of something.
Single that I ever bought.
Oh, on Pie. Go on. You're gonna have to tell us who that's by.
Who is it? I
can't read it.
It's the Kinks 8-man.
Oh,
Lovely.
okay, very good.
Hang on, I just changed my view of you for some reason. You've gone
small.
I'm trying to get you all on screen. Oh, that's fine. So that's the 8-man. I got that with Martin when we first decided we were going to buy a record. Yeah, look, this isn't the original.
No, it isn't.
But because Martin took the original. When we used to buy albums sometimes together, and then we also bought albums separately, but then we'd forget who actually owned that album.
Yeah.
And Nod's As Good As a Wink, I think, is the most played record in my life ever.
Oh, really?
This works in whatever mood I'm in.
So remind us, what tracks are on that record?
Well, Stay With Me, of course.
Okay.
The beautiful Debris.
Debris, yes. Wonderful song.
Ronnie Lane singing.
Yes. Yeah.
Miss Judy's Farm, You're So Rude. Love Lives Here. Oh, God. I mean, there's something very old-fashioned about this. It has a sense of songs that I might have heard coming out of a pub in the 1950s, played on an upright piano.
Yeah.
There's a sense of working-class humour on the record.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, there's incredible slide guitar on things like Too Bad and That's All You Need. So I really I'm tempted to pick this. I'm going to flick through what else I showed you, and I'm just going to.
Oh, we want to see the candidates. We want to see the candidates.
Now, this is a main one because there was a poster in this when you bought it.
Oh yes.
The poster was rude. It was made up of tiny little pictures that are taken backstage and on the road and recording, you know, which I always loved.
Yeah.
There was one of a topless girl in there.
Oh,
so I had to hide the poster so my parents wouldn't see it. I couldn't put it up in my room. And in the end, I remember my mum I saw my mum going in my bedroom with a Hoover, and I run in there quickly and I destroyed the poster.
Oh, no. It's the idea that before the internet, all a 14-year-old boy had to go on was a tiny little picture at the top of a,
and was so terrified that his parents.
Wow!
We were talking about it the other day. We did
talking about it the other day. Was that
a podcast about the Steve Merritt book?
My brother and I love this record so much.
It ain't half been a gas.
We go home on Monday.
It's really been a gas. I want to tell you. Incredible guitar work.
Phenomenal record.
Peter Frampton was obviously, we had him on the show. He was part of that whole band.
Yeah.
And I just love Steve's voice. I think Steve's one of the greatest people that we were ever given in music. This is the best live album ever.
Also, if you open it out, Gary, it's got the classic case of all the millions of pictures.
Yeah.
And you used to look at it and think, oh my God, I'd love to be in one of those pictures, didn't you?
That one I loved. That one.
Talking about gangs, wasn't that one of the best examples of gangs you wanted to be a member of? Humble Pie. It looked like so much fun. Of course, read the recent memoir about him. You discovered that it was very far from a
walk in the park.
A picnic, exactly.
But what was also good about this band, and I showed this band to someone recently who's a great musician who'd never really listened to it, is they swung.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh
yeah, Hallelujah, I love so, yeah.
All of their songs swung.
Yeah.
You know, very few bands ever want to do a record that swings like that and play rock music at the same time. Here's another great rock album, by the way. I loved Man.
Oh man! Wow, which one is that? Is that Rhinos Winos?
Maximum Darkness.
Oh, good God! I haven't seen that in a long time.
And we went to. I was at this show because we went to the Roundhouse. I went with my brother.
Were you at the Man Show at the Roundhouse?
Yes.
I was when Michael Nesmith was on as well at the same show, the same exact birthday party.
I hope I can't remember that for some reason, but I do.
Were you there, Dave?
I saw Man at the Roundhouse, and I'm sure I saw it as part of his exact birthday party, but maybe I'm wrong.
Okay.
Anyway,
am I keeping you guys?
No, go on.
Oh, old records. Of course, Electric Warrior.
Well, this was the first album I ever owned, and it was bought for me Christmas '71. That makes
right. Yeah, it would be. Yes,
and I still think this is a immaculate record.
It's a great record.
Beautiful songs on there, fantastic playing, unique sound,
really unique sound, extraordinary sound.
You know, and you know that speeded up guitar, and obviously it was the first time that I ever saw the name Tony Visconti.
Yeah.
And there was one track on here though that I couldn't play without my mum listening, and I think it was called Rip Off, and there was something rather sexual in there. It's like I couldn't play Life's a Gas because that bit where he dances himself out of the womb. I can't have that on in the house. My mum's gonna hear it.
There's a book to be written about your relationship with your mother, clearly.
I mean, if I've got to just quickly flip through. Yes.
Oh, great record.
Yes.
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 Oh, yeah. Oh, lovely.
That, I mean, two great songs on there. I
love
backing vocals.
And I still love the story of the sleeve of that. Well, he got them all there for dinner, didn't he, at Q? And then just suddenly said afterwards, put these clothes up, we're going to take a picture. Lovely.
Yeah, right. I never knew that.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, I could go on about this for years and have gone on about this for years and made documentaries on it. In fact, I unveiled the plaque in Hedden's not that long ago. Although now this is extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, Quadrophenia.
Oh, Quadrophenia, okay.
Yeah.
You know, as a piece of work from Pete. Pete's someone I really admire in the business, and I just think it's his best piece of work ever, and just wonderful storytelling and music and thematic stuff. I'm going to show you two more records because I'm going to bore the hell out of you with this. But obviously,
this is brilliant.
The Beatles are. I've got. That's the weirdest cover ever. I can't even show that.
Oh, of course.
No, your mother wouldn't like that one.
Quickly.
Obviously.
Yeah.
Over is probably my favorite.
Yeah.
This is another one that changed the world.
Fantastic record.
Right.
Absolutely brilliant.
The one I love is gone somewhere. I've got. Oh my God, where'd that to it? It's all here somewhere. Sorry, boys. I'm
no, go on.
Going to find one of the records that I particularly loved, and it is there it is. I mean, that's a beautiful.
Oh God!
Yes,
that's a correct answer.
Did that take you by surprise?
No, well, I tell you the interesting thing about that record. Do you know how many LPs Fairport Convention made in 1969? Three.
Wow.
What we did on our holidays came out at the beginning of the year.
Which is a great
Unhalf Breaking, which is the best one, comes out in the spring.
Yeah.
And then they have their car crash, the van crash, Reform.
I know the fact that all happened in the same year.
Make that record.
Yeah.
Comes out in September, I think, something like that. Absolutely extraordinary.
And to get the new line-up together and record another record. Astonishing.
I love the cover on Unhalf Bricking. Is it with those?
Sandy's parents, isn't it?
It's
Sandy's parents.
It's Sandy's parents outside of their home in Wimbledon, and on the back they're all sitting having a kind of full English breakfast, I think.
But what I like about this album as well is it was an important period where folk music was being embraced generally. I mean, Steve Norman, now you would never know this, right? Talking about my eclectic background. I got really into folk music. In fact, I got some old book of ballads where written in the 18th century. And I, for a while, I just set them to music. This is when I was about 15 years old, 14.
Amazing.
And, but I used to go with Steve Norman to a place off of Upper Street, pub called The Flowers, I think it was called. I can't remember. There was a folk club upstairs, and we'd go and watch people with their fingers in their ears singing. This is the year before punk, right? But not that dissimilar, I have to say. You know, there is a direct line between what Johnny Rotten was doing and what these guys singing earthy songs of the soil or of the Industrial Revolution. And I really love that period. And Planksty came into my life.
And they were often protest songs. They were often protest songs, weren't they? They had a kind of political edge to them. They're about, what was happening in the world.
Of course.
The Enclosure Acts.
And I think but this album does seem to capture it. That folk rock period. I mean, I can't pick this great album, but if you want one from me, I'll chuck that in.
That's fine.
Very good.
The idea that Gary Kemp picks Legion Leaf is exactly the kind of unexpected turn that we're here to celebrate. Gary, it's been a joy talking to you.
That was such fun.
It was
terrific.
Great fun, and as we can finally say, we've done all these interviews over the last year. We can finally say good luck with the album.
Thank you.
And the podcast.
It's
called the tour.
It's called In Solo, and it's coming out in June.
It comes out in June. Available for pre-order now, I think, Gary. Is that right?
It depends
I thought it was.
Out, of course. It depends when this goes out.
Sometime in the next week.
I would say, then yes, it will be available right now. Go to your favourite place.
Okay.
Not
Gary, it's been lovely to talk to you. I think.
Word in Your Attic, a Zoom with a View.